Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you about Black Clover, one of my personal favorites in anime and manga, and something I think is kind of unfairly underrated. Um, just like online and stuff, everybody just trashes on Black Clover, and it's it's nothing crazy, nothing terribly thought provoking or whatnot, but it's not really trying to be. It's very solid all around the board. Anime and manga. And I think people kind of unfairly judge it a bit too harshly. I personally don't think it's on par with like One Piece or anything, but it's still one of my favorites, and it keeps me coming back. But yeah, a lot of people label it mid and whatnot, and I think that's largely because it's not creative in the fact that it relies on a lot of typical shonen shonen tropes and whatnot. Um, but what I think is creative and unique to like the Black Clover experience is that it kind of like parodies them and like makes fun of them, and it's very self aware that it's using like an over an over saturated like cliche in like anime and stuff, which I think is part of what makes it super enjoyable. And like my favorite example of this is Yami, because Yami is a character that's like an ex shonen protagonist, like an ex isekai protagonist, because he came here from another world, or more accurately, like another country, which is from what little information we have is like this world's equivalent of Japan or whatever. Um, and there, the setting is more of like a feudal, uh, medieval Europe type thing. Because we see churches and whatnot, but obviously with magic and more fantasy setting. But Yami has this whole thing where like surpassing his limits, and it's literally like an old shonen protagonist that grew up and whatnot, and he just like comes to expect this stuff. There's like one of my favorite lines is in the arc. I forget what it's called. It's like the Eye of the Midnight Sun arc. No, because that's the name of like when they raided the capital or whatever. Um, it's the arc where it was in like the cave, and Yami fought Licht for the first time, and like we got a significant development for Gauche. Um, that arc, that whole thing. Uh, I forget if that arc is the Eye of the Midnight Sun arc, or if that was the raid arc. But I'm getting off on a tangent. Uh, there's like this line in it where like the other captains show up after the third eye shows up, and they're like all fighting, because Yami's already like beaten into the ground or whatnot. And Yami's just like, oh, why'd you show up? I was just about to surpass my limits. Because it's like, in Shonen, like the thing is, once you're backed against the corner, you get some absurd power up automatically, and you just you just wreck everybody. So he's literally like an ex Shonen protagonist in that he just his whole thing is surpass your limits, because he just expects that when you're backed in the corner, you're just gonna get some insane power up, with the power of friendship or whatever. And it's goofy and it's really unique, I think. And a lot of other characters do this, and not quite as noticeably. Noelle, for example, is like a super tsundere type cliche. Um, but it's it's enjoyable. Um, and I think maybe people don't pick up on that quite so often, and maybe that's why it's regarded as mid or whatever, because people just see that and it's just like, oh, I've seen this before, or like, oh, this whole thing is that he was born without magic, and he has a devil inside him. Oh, he born without something and has something inside him. Oh, that's like Naruto, or that's like I don't know, My Hero. Um, oh, that he wants to become the Wizard King. Oh, that's like Hokage, or like Pirate King, because the basic setup right off the bat does have a lot of influence from a lot of other things. Um, but like on the topic of like the Pirate King, on the topic of One Piece, I believe he took a significant amount of. Well, I shouldn't say that, but like he wants to write this story to be like a long running story in a similar length to One Piece. I believe he said in an interview at one time. Um, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe I heard that somewhere that he said that in an interview, which is cool because he has a lot of setup and like there's a lot of inspiration from like real world like grimoires and mythology and whatnot. That's through the and fantasy settings that go into this. That has like a lot of potential for the future. Like for example, there's a race of dwarves that we only have one canon example of, that being like the half dwarf Charmy. But like we haven't actually met a full dwarf. Uh, so like way down the line that is probably going to come up at some point. But like there's like with Vengeance's ability, they like casually name dropped Yggdrasil. But one of his techniques is called Yggdrasil, and I guess that doesn't necessarily confirm that Yggdrasil is, going to be a part of this story. But if it is, that brings into the possibility of like other worlds and stuff. And I believe the world of dwarves is one of the worlds on the Yggdrasil tree. And if you're not familiar with Yggdrasil, it is basically just a Norse mythology type thing. There's this big tree, and then there's different worlds that are on the different branches, and that's I don't know. That's a very abridged explanation, but that's the basic premise. And Yggdrasil or something similar does show up a lot in media or anime manga, so I feel like most people are familiar with it by now. Um, but that being said, yeah, I think it has a lot of potential for longevity. Um, and it's good. Like, what else was there that was like the whole like Tree of Qliphoth, um, with the current arc, the Spade Kingdom arc, like that has a lot of to do with genuine like I don't even know what to say like occult type things from like the past, and there's like a lot of inspiration from like actual like grimoires and like these satanic rituals or whatever, that were performed, uh, or now well I guess performed, yeah, but like all these like ancient tomes and whatnot or old books, detailing like devil stuff. And there's with the prominence of devils in particular, in the series at the moment, there's been a lot of like real world inspiration, um, for like the devils in Black Clover and whatnot. And it's really cool to see. Like I really like researching the lore. I guess I shouldn't say researching, because I've just watched other people's videos on it, going in depth of like, oh, this devil has a lot of connections to this actual other devil or that was believed to be real or whatever. And like you know Dante being kind of representative of Dante's Inferno, which in of itself is sort of an allegory for the Tree of Qliphoth. Uh, but yeah, like there's just a lot of cool stuff, and like the amount of thought that obviously went into writing the more deeper lore, um, for like these devils and things is very interesting, and I do like like watching videos on it to just go deeper and see that. And I think that's perhaps another reason why people regard it as more mid tier, because these just cool devils and whatnot, and that's cool or whatever. But that's just another typical bad guy thing. And if you're dealing with devils in particular, that's literally just like straight up the embodiment of evil. And sometimes with villains that are just straight up evil, it lacks the opportunity for like gray areas and nuance and stuff like that. And some of the best villains um, in anime and manga are usually the ones that are more uh, sympathetic, ones where you can see their side of view, or ones where like you can technically maybe side with them under different circumstances. One of my favorite examples being Funny Valentine from JoJo's, in which like from you could very easily have read the entirety of Stillbar Run, as with Funny Valentine as the protagonist and the actual protagonist, Johnny Joestar, being the antagonist, and still, it still would have made sense because really, um, more or less, Funny Valentine's motivations is that of complete altruism and patriotism. He's trying to take the corpse parts for the greater good of his nation, and this cowboy is trying to take that away from him. But obviously, Valentine uses some unscrupulous methods, shall I say, to achieve that. But it still is, done for the greater good. And that's where you kind of get that sense that, you can sympathize with him more, and it's a more, it's a less two-dimensional villain than, devils being straight up evil. But what the devils lack in that, multiple facets of their character, it makes up for me personally with that like more deeper lore and real world inspirations that make it very interesting to research what they're based off of, and then maybe reread certain sections with that new perspective, which has made this particular arc very interesting for me. um, but yeah, it's got a lot of cool stuff going on in my opinion, and the only like I definitely do see the potential for it to be, a long running series. Maybe not quite as long as One Piece, but definitely along by typical standards. The only major problem I'm seeing with that maybe being like the power creep, in that um, he likes to do this thing where like we're introduced to the villain of the arc, right? And he's like this insanely powerful villain. Oh, how are we gonna beat this guy? And then he doesn't actually turn out to be a villain of the arc, and then a more powerful person comes, and we still have to beat them, and then we get some insane power-ups that allow us to beat them. But then next time we repeat the same cycle, and we're getting even stronger by like magnitudes of 10 each time. And there's multiple examples of this. For the water temple example, the entire arc initially just seemed like a battle royale between the Black Bulls and the warriors of the water temple. I forget if they have a name. But then the one guy came, punched his way in, and is just like, I'm the Midnight Sun, and I'm also, more powerful than everybody here. So now I'm the big bad for this arc. And then, the elf arc, what happened? Well, actually, there's even another example with the raid on the Eye of the Midnight Sun base, where we thought we were gonna fight Raya or Lyre, or he has a few different names, try translations for his names, based on scans and whatnot. But I think the official name is Raya, maybe. What would that the guy with of the Midnight Sun that can copy magic, has copy magic. We went into it thinking, oh, he's going to be the big bad of the arc, but then Licht awakened, the genuine Licht, and yeah, obviously he wasn't technically an antagonist. He was more like half awake at the time. But it's still, elevating that power to a greater threat. And then the elf arc continued, and then we thought Licht was going to be, or not Licht. Talking about Licht just makes everything confusing because there's Licht, but not Licht, and Licht is also vengeance, and but but that Licht isn't actually Licht, But whatever. But that arc we thought it was going to be him, and then it ended up being Zagrid, the first like big devil that we got introduced to. And then even now in this Big Kingdom arc, we thought we were going to be fighting against the Dark Triad, and then we started to fight against the Dark Triad, and more devils showed up. And this time they are, the top cream of the crop devils. And what happened? Asta got an insane power up, and now he's, able to destroy these, crazy strong devils more or less single handedly. Obviously, he had some help from Noct there, but it's still, pretty impressive. Like, but what that runs the risk of, obviously, is, if we're going for a long-term series, then, the amount of power that they have, even just 2 or 3 arcs down the line is going to be, crazy. And, like, yeah, I don't know. So that's maybe one criticism I have of the story, um, that I think is valid. But like, the the people who just say it's mid for the fact that it doesn't, it's just kind of tried and true formula or whatnot. I think maybe you should read into it a bit more, because I personally think it's probably one of the more enjoyable modern shonen, and does a lot of the tropes better, in my opinion, than a lot of other things do. And just generally more interesting concepts and better setting. Just a lot of good stuff. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Really, kind of a shorter video than I usually do. But I just wanted to talk about that briefly because I like Black Clover a lot, and I just wanted to get my praise for it out there. So with that being said, see ya.